The age of just building a brand off of direct response ads is dead. Brands don't do the persona work in advance of creating and investing media dollars. I think that that's ultimately probably the most important thing right now, outside of obviously creating that creative flywheel. Having diversified media across the top funnel is really important.
Welcome to the DTC Insider podcast, where online business owners come to find actionable tips and tactics to grow their businesses. Now, here's your host, Brian Roisentul.
Hey, welcome to another episode of the DTC Insider podcast. I'm Brian Roisentul, your host, and today I'm super excited to chat with AJ Patel, the SVP of Global Growth at UBeauty. Hey, AJ, thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I'm super excited about this specifically because I've been chatting with amazing brand founders for the last few months and haven't had the chance to talk to many, SVP or VP of growth. So I know we can get into the trenches and talk about many exciting stuff in today's era of marketing. So before going there, why don't you start by introducing yourself and UBeauty?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been in the e-commerce space for over a decade now, well over a decade. And started with UBeauty around 3 years ago. UBeauty is an amazing brand, amazing product. We have obviously a focus on skincare, but it's really a technology brand. We have patented technology called Siren Capsule technology, which basically allows us to produce multifunctional product as well as utilize lower level of actives because of a delivery mechanism that we use. So the product itself is incredible. It's very different. I would say that we're more so a technology brand versus a traditional skincare brand.
Okay.
And, prior to this, I was with Unilever for 8 years, spent a number of years working across analytics, e-commerce, various different roles within that org. Working in the prestige skincare division. And so have been in the space for quite some time. And yeah, it's been an exciting journey for the brand. We're continuing to see positive momentum and strong growth.
Amazing. I'm happy to hear that. I started working personally in the commerce space for, since 2013. So, yeah, it's been a while. I'm not that old. You're not old either, right? But we are experienced, as people say. We have a lot of experience. But what's certain here is that everything changed in the world, right? Pre-COVID, post-COVID, but in the commerce space too. So when we talk about the good old days, what would you like to, let's say, to be real again or to be back from those good old days, and why and what you don't miss, let's say?
Yeah, I think the biggest shift that's happened over the last decade or so is the enactment of a lot of privacy restrictions. Obviously, you hear about the Apple privacy updates and Google privacy updates. Whereas historically you were able to target an individual user and you could really get narrow and deep with your targeting, layer on a bunch of different attributes to try to, scale and grow and maintain first order profitability, which I think is really important for any business. Nowadays, you have to rely a lot on the algorithm, right? So you're not necessarily able to get that consistent feedback loop because of these privacy restrictions that exist. And with Cappy, there's a lot of different things that you could do with Meta to kind of improve the signal that they're getting to ultimately provide additional signal as they are optimizing with their algorithm. So it's a little bit different, a little bit more shift back to, I would say, a little bit traditional marketing where you were doing more broad strokes versus, hyper-targeted marketing. But I think that that's really the biggest shift that has happened over the past decade or so.
Yeah, I agree. I personally think that it's not that before brands weren't doing marketing, but that we, but still there was, brands had it easy, Facebook ads back then. It was Facebook, it was a money making machine. You put
Yes.
$1 and you got 10. No marketing, laser targeted audiences. Oh my god! I remember I used to have like in my notes saved audiences. Like I don't know if it was a beauty brand, beauty magazines, beauty influencer, beauty whatever, competitors. It was like my saved audiences. It was like my Bible, my secret sauce. At some point, it was. People used to share what worked for them, and ads. Well, I don't know if I want to look at my ads back then, because they weren't the start. The audiences were. We had a full theater with our ideal customers, and then all we needed to do was to put up there, a sign saying "Buy my stuff." Now it's the opposite, right? We target broad audience mainly, and we need to have a laser targeted message. And for
Yeah.
that, we need to do marketing. We need to know who we are talking to, what they want, pain points. So where do you see that, in your opinion, brands are probably falling into, let's say, a trap or missing out? Like, do you think that brands, at least do the due diligence to really find out who their customers are and what they care about?
Yeah, I think that that's probably the biggest trap that I see brands falling into, right? They don't do the persona work in advance of creating and investing media dollars. I think that that's ultimately probably the most important thing right now, outside of obviously creating that creative flywheel, and making sure that you have a lot of iterations of creative active in the account so that Meta, for example, has the opportunity to optimize. Um, and then I think the other piece is that there's an over reliance on Meta, since obviously a decade ago it was performing so well, that there's almost a lack of understanding or a lack of utilization of these additional um, platforms and steps within the marketing funnel. I think, the age of just building a brand off of direct response ads is dead. Really shifting and focusing more on a full funnel strategy is important, because at the end of the day, you're trying to build a brand, and not everyone's trying to do that. There are obviously,
Yeah.
these brands which are trying to do more so impulse purchases where you're selling a $10 product. But for us at U Beauty, what we're trying to do is really trying to build a brand with strong brand equity and, trying to build brand loyalty. And so as a result of that, it's really important for us to have, various different placements across the full marketing funnel. We just launched a campaign with Michelle Monahan, who's obviously featured in White Lotus prominently, and that's really an opportunity for us to gain additional brand awareness by having her as our global brand ambassador.
Exactly.
And so, making sure that you focus not just on the direct response meta side, and really also focus on, top and mid funnel. The traditional conversion funnel still exists. And so you need to fill the entire funnel.
Yeah, I'm happy you talk about that, because you mentioned that, because I want to go into that rabbit hole. You mentioned full funnel strategy. What does that look like, at least for you, beauty, in practice? For brands listening to these, for marketers, what do you
Yeah, yeah.
mean by that, and how do you put that? How do you implement that?
Yeah, I would say that, we look at, developing awareness through multiple different channels, whether that be PR, whether that be through your influencer partnerships, whether that be through meta ads, which are more focused on top of funnel KPIs. So I would say that really, having a breadth of kind of tactics that you're utilizing at the top of funnel is really important. Obviously, there are ones which are better from a conversion standpoint. Your meta is still going to win
Yeah.
from a conversion standpoint, especially with measurement. I think TikTok, it's underutilized for luxury. I think that there's an opportunity for luxury brands to play out there. Traditionally, with TikTok shops, it was more so impulse purchases in the past. But now you have kind of this opportunity to also utilize that platform. And, you can do additional measurement through your post-purchase survey or utilizing lift analysis or incrementality testing with a partner there. And I think that that's really important. So diversifying the top of funnel, because at the end of the day, you got to think of it like your media is, your customers are in various different trees in an apple orchard, right? And so you have low hanging fruit on Meta, for example, as one tree, that's a bigger tree. And then you maybe have lower hanging fruit on TikTok, your CTV, your even advertising on X, for example, wherever that might be. And you have to try capture all of that low hanging fruit, because as you go up the tree, it's more difficult to pick, right? So having diversified media across the top of funnel is really
To give
important.
people a reference, of course, if you can say this, more or less what percentage of your marketing budget goes to these top of the funnel efforts? More or less.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't necessarily been as focused on the top of funnel historically. Transparently, we are really more so focused on it over the past couple of years. I'll say, giving kind of a range anywhere between 20-ish, 10 to 20% it's kind of where I would suggest a brand kind of invest into top and mid funnel. Obviously, you still want performance media and you want, attribution for
At
the
the end of the
dollars.
day, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm just guessing, but I guess you're asked for results, and that's, orders. So at the end of the day, that's why I'm asking you these questions, because, it's a beautiful brand, and you're the SVP of Growth, and many people listening, probably smaller brands or some bigger brands, listening and saying, hey, should I be spending on brand? Because I hear that it's really important to build a brand, but how do I build a brand? What do I, do I spend my time only, like recording videos, doing organic content, or should I spend paid efforts, PR, performance campaigns, but linked to top of funnel results? So if you had to say for you, Beauty, is it more organic content, partnerships with influencers, and PR more than the paid efforts towards top of the funnel?
We do both. And even within influencers, for example, there's influencers which you work with for different objectives, right?
Right.
We just did a partnership with Sir John, for example, where it was more of an awareness play. Sir John is Beyonce's, obviously, makeup artist. And he was doing more so a day in the life style content. And that's really, great content for us to develop that brand awareness. He has obviously an amazing following on his Instagram and social media accounts. And then you have more of like the direct response, micros and nanos who really their sole focus, or what your sole objective with them is to drive conversion. So I think, we utilize some of very similar channels for performance marketing as well as top and mid funnel. And it's important to have kind of that balance and identify the objective for each investment that you're making.
Yeah, 100%. And what channels are you present on mainly, like Meta? You mentioned TikTok.
Yeah, I would say Meta, TikTok, YouTube's a good channel, CTV. I think there's various different channels.
Do you do long form content or just shorts?
We do. I would say the longest form is around a minute long for
YouTube.
YouTube, for example. We don't do kind of a 5-minute, 10-minute video on there.
Maybe it's me, but the other day I was surprised when I interviewed a founder, and her brand had like almost 7,000 followers on YouTube, which is not a lot, but it's decent because they only created 3 long-form videos in their lifetime. However, they had like 300 or 700 short-form videos. So all they do is short without long-form. So I'm not a YouTube expert, but I have never seen that before. Like pure short-form content to grow a channel, and not like an updated strategy. And no, like always, only 3 videos that are probably 2 or 3 year old, like long-form videos. And it's like, whoa, that got my attention.
Yeah, I think YouTube Shorts is an interesting play for a lot of brands right now, especially with the uncertainty of TikTok. That's definitely an opportunity for brands to play in that space. They have a really engaged audience, and they have obviously the power of Google's measurement, which is, I would say the best in class, second to Meta maybe. But, from an attribution standpoint, because you're utilizing YouTube Shorts and that exists within the Google marketing suite, you're able to also then retarget utilizing other Google products, which is I think really beneficial for a brand and for a business.
Yeah, and I think the content creation barrier went down a lot. Of course, the editing, like with all these AI
Yes.
tools in the end, right? Meta launched edits. We have the TikTok tool as well, in CapCut, etc. So we there's a lot, but also the similarity between the content types across channels like Instagram Reels, TikToks, and Shorts. And some brands that being in public, let's say I interviewed John Roman, the CEO of BattleBox, last year, and he says publicly, that they do beautiful content, well thought content. They even have their own TV show on Netflix. So that's how good they are at content and how much effort they have, their own crew, and even them, they repurpose the IG Reels or the TikTok creations to YouTube Shorts. Even though it's not ideal or what's recommended, it works really well for them. They have over 1 million subscribers there. So, yeah, it's as easy as we can get.
Yeah.
So, one more thing I wanted to ask you is, we have, again, YouTube, we have Meta, we have, you said TikTok. Do you do Google Ads?
Of course, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but what's the number one channel that you can say, I don't want to,
Yeah.
don't.
I mean, I think it's the same for most e-commerce brands at this point. We have a heavy reliance on Meta.
Meta.
Yeah. Obviously, I think every single brand is trying to divest a little bit away from their reliance on Meta, but it's challenged, right? Because it's not really a performance-based channel, which you can really see, strong lower funnel results. I think that TikTok does drive a lot of performance, but their measurement is a little bit challenging. So you have to use post-purchase survey or, like I said, lift analysis to measure the benefit of that. So yeah, I mean, I think Meta is still the gold standard there.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, everyone says, you need to diversify, blah, blah, but nothing works besides Meta and those 3, Google for some brands, TikTok for others, and Meta. I interviewed recently Aaron Noswich, the founder of Breeze, the mushroom-based or CBD beverage, and they actually invest on, or at least when I interviewed him, on app loving. App loving, it was super hot for a lot of months in the US, and they actually, again, I don't know if it's a constant, but for a few months, they invested as much on app loving than on Meta. And it was working very well for them. They build in public too. So besides the conversation we had, they keep posting about it, and they they show not only what they spend, but the results, the revenue from it. So I was amazed by that. Some others are trying Whatnot, the live stream platform.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think AppLovin is a great solution. I think that they obviously there's limitations and burnout within their audience that a lot of brands have observed. And there's also questions which exist around kind of the attribution model that they utilize. I'm sure you may have seen some of the feedback from on Bloomberg, etc., which is around kind of the measurement of AppLovin. I think that they have a very cool solution, and it's unique in a way that they present it with in-app. So it's a great solution. I think that it's still not the level of where Meta is.
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
Yeah. One more thing I wanted to ask you about, customer acquisition is a word that was probably a buzzword for, I don't know, during 2023, 2024, and it's profitability. During, we discussed about, the good old days at the beginning of the conversation, and post-COVID, everyone was, trying to grow at all costs until they realized around 2023 or more or less that that wasn't a thing, that they needed to be profitable, every single brand. So do you remember when was the point in which you said, okay, we need to draw a line in the sand and start being profitable on the first order right now? And what was the strategy to pull that off?
Yeah, I mean, I think all brands should try to be first order profitable. Number one, never rely on your customer lifetime value for your profit. I think that at the end of the day, unless you're a subscription model, then it's a very different model which you guys are operating with. Money used to be cheap, right? 2020, 2021, your interest rates were super low. Those macro impacts. So from a financial perspective, invest as much dollars as you can. But as money becomes more expensive, it becomes more important for you to maintain and you want to have a profitable business. And I think that the days of these large, for example, in our case, CPG players acquiring brands which were unprofitable and they were just focused solely on growth is dead, right? You see that with the challenges that maybe some of these, e-commerce darlings, I would say, like have had, and they haven't been acquired, and there's been less interest in them from the large big players because they're struggling with profitability. They know how to grow the business. They know how to build a top line of $100 million, but what they struggle with is how to build a business with a top line of $100 million with a strong EBITDA at the end of the day. And so personally, and what we've done is we've really focused on optimizing our content and making sure that we are delivering and building a sustainable business. We never want to be in a situation where we're growing maybe 300%, but that's not a sustainable growth, right? I think for us, we've really focused on maintaining a more steady growth, but doing so in a profitable or break-even kind of way, right? And so I think that's the strategy that brands need to employ, especially brands which are looking to get acquired in the future, because at the end of the day, that is what these large players are looking for. Money is more expensive right now. You can't just borrow, money at 1% interest rate like you used to be able to in 2020 and 2021. You're now looking at an interest rate of 8%, right? So in order to be a sustainable business, profitability is king.
And what was the strategy that you implemented at New Beauty to?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say our most important KPI, and it's probably the most important KPI for 90% of brands out there, is looking at the AOV of a CAC. The days of just looking at pure ROAS is kind of dead, right? I think ROAS is a proxy metric, and it is
Yeah.
important. But in order to drive a sustainable business, you need to drive new customer acquisition, and you need to make sure that that new customer acquisition is actually going to be profitable for you or break even for you.
So what you did mainly is did you change the core offer to be to for something with a higher AOV?
We looked at kind of our marketing, and we understood where we had opportunity to drive a profitable first order. So we looked across, portfolio of ads that we were running, and we identified, hey, this is one which the AOV is high enough to where we could still drive scale and growth, and at the same time, it's going to be, at the very minimum, first order break even for us.
Yeah, that's very important. I think the same. ROAS used to be the ultimate metric because we didn't even need to look outside the ad account back then. But actually we needed, but we didn't realize that until we needed to do it. After the iOS 14 thing in 2021. So everything forced us marketers to look at what we always needed to look at, the metrics outside the ad account. And now, in the CAC, it's it's like the CAC to LTV ratio. Well, the LTV is such I'm still amazed. I don't have the answer why, but at the lack of information that Shopify gives advertisers. I love Shopify. They give, brands with many valuable information. But there are some basic stuff that probably they are letting, third-party apps thrive through that information. But, they don't give you the LTV, right? They don't give you the time between orders. They don't give you the average order per customers. They don't give you what people buy over time, what's purchased together. They give you 3 samples of 3 products. And so how do you measure that, and which metrics are you obsessed with, or do you monitor frequently?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different applications or plugins that plug into Shopify. Without going into too specifics on our tech stack, I mean, you have the report builder, report pundit, and for example, Shopify, or your retention axis of Shopify too, which easily calculates some of those. I think obviously there is some nuances to the data, identifying and merging records to develop a unified golden record was actually one of the big projects that I worked with when I was at Unilever Prestige, was to how do we, we have all of this data across multiple different brands. How do we build out this kind of golden record? Because at the end of the day, customers are using different emails when they go make purchases, or they're using a different shipping address, or they're using different names within the same household. So, sometimes with customers too, they'll sign up with a different email address because they want, the first order offer, which a lot of brands offer, where they're offering 15 or 20%. Yeah, on the first order. They want that multiple times. So, I think that's something which is really a little bit more challenging within Shopify to achieve. We utilize third-party tools to kind of do some of that work for us.
I mean, at my agency, we use a third-party tool that we love. And I'm not going to mention it here, but we have done a lot of mini guides, newsletters about it, because it helps us see everything that I mentioned that we cannot see on Shopify. But I was wondering, the same happened to bundles and other things that were, that lived in third-party tools, and then Shopify, added to to their own offers. So yeah, maybe I mean, it's such a basic metric that you should have. But yeah, anyway, I'm worried about the fact that whenever, let's say, we do an audit for a brand, or even if we don't do the audit, we chat with the brand, but we see even more when we do an audit for them. Many don't know the basic stuff. And I'm talking about 8-figure brands, not like 6-figure brands, 5-figure. And they don't know some of those basic stuff because it's not there and they don't know where to look or they don't bother looking, right? So yeah, that's why I was, wondering the metrics you were obsessed with as the VP of Growth, because again, as you said, it's not ROAS, it's CAC, LTV, and you also offer subscriptions, right? Or am I wrong?
Yeah, we do. We do. I will say also, right, conducting a margin profitability across your product assortment is really important too. A lot of brands don't do that and truly try to understand, what their cost is for a product plus their shipping costs.
Well, now with
Um,
tariff, probably they are cutting the
yes,
low
absolutely.
profitability products, right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So that's a really important thing. I mean, I think tariffs is a game changer for a lot of brands, especially ones which are maybe a little lower in terms of product margin. Um, it's going to be a struggle. I mean, I think that a lot of brands will, and you've seen a little bit of an exit from brands investing in Meta because it's a struggle for them to make that channel profitable anymore.
And it's the chicken and the egg dilemma, because
Yes.
if you like order inventory from China, you need to pay for crazy tariffs. But if you don't, you don't sell. And if you don't sell, or if you stop, let's say, advertising, and that's the bread and butter of how you produce revenue or generate revenue, you keep from generating revenue. So I think it's super, super tough. So how are you approaching that? If you want to talk about that, what you can at least say about that. Are you, you know, are you impacted or not? I know you sell internationally, and I want to touch base on that in a minute. But besides that, how are you dealing with that? Because it's tough. Not only the tariffs, the uncertainty of what will
Yeah, I
come.
will say that we're lucky in that our products are manufactured in Europe, which is maybe a little bit less impacted than a lot of brands which manufacture their products in the Far East. I think that there is definitely an impact in terms of your gross margins and your product margins that you're seeing um, in general. Um, not to dive too deep into it, I think that you need to look at your portfolio, and there's typically most brands have an 80-20 rule, where 20% of your products driving 80% of your revenue. And you need to look within that 20% of products and see which products are, you know, most impacted by potential tariffs or changes in the supply chain. And, maybe it's that you need to pivot a little bit and focus more so on the products which exist within that 20%, but still have a strong profitability
Yeah, and
benchmark.
based on what I heard and what I discussed here as well with some other founders and operators, is trying to negotiate everything you can,
Yes.
suppliers, vendors,
Yes.
like everything you can negotiate, like net 30, net 60, I don't know, but whatever you can do these days will help. But yeah, it's a tough context, and again, for me, it's tariffs are the thing, but the uncertainty, it's even bigger
Yeah.
because we don't know whether it will last 1 more week, 2 more weeks. Like we all know, I mean, Trump said it, there will be tariffs, but he said that it won't be as high as, you know, as 145 or something like that percent. So is it going to be 75 tomorrow, next week, next month? So is it going to be 30? So how do you plan as a brand? Well, I don't want to go into
Yeah.
that rabbit hole because it's
And
really
I
uncertain.
think I think also money's still not cheap, right? It's still very expensive to borrow money.
Yeah.
Your line of credit, if a business has one, is upwards of 8%. interest rate, I think that's a floor really right now
Yeah.
that you're getting. So
So
it's challenging for a lot of brands out there which aren't maybe profitable, or they're kind of at the break even point. It's really impacting a lot of business, and yeah, it's I think the uncertainty is a big piece which a lot of brands are fearful of, is how long is this going to last, and
exactly.
how long can they sustain themselves under
Yeah.
their current model with these new tariffs.
Yeah. So you said that you manufacture in Europe, right? Are you, you know, placing a bet on that continent as well, or
We've always manufactured in Europe. I think that's really
yeah?
you know
And now,
part of the ethos.
are you betting on that market for operating as well and generating revenue outside of the U.S. too?
Yeah, I mean, I think that U.S. still will continue to be the focus for us as a business. I think uh, it's still the biggest growth market, and biggest opportunity for luxury in particular. China's really struggling out there with luxury brands. You see it in kind of their quarterly reports from LVMH, etc. Everyone's saying is that the luxury market in China is struggling, and they're putting a lot of new money into supply or circulation. So as there's inflationary pressures, it's going to be more and more challenging in that market. I think that there are definitely, other markets that are interesting for us. Europe continues to be interesting. Middle East. You look at kind of the markets where there's a growing middle class and upper class, and those are definitely markets that we're
So the
interested in.
UK, for example, are you active there or about to be active there?
Yeah, we have a website dedicated for the UK and international, and that's definitely a really strong market for us. We're featured prominently in Harrods, which is
Yeah.
luxury department store in the UK, and we're always looking at opportunity within the UK marketplace. I think that second to the US, that's probably the most consistent market for
Yeah.
English speaking market for
Yeah, I was
luxury
going to say
brands.
that. Yeah, Germany's strong too, but it's. I have heard it's way tougher. People are more closed. You need to be from there, or well, it's in
Yeah.
German, everything. So I wanted to ask, for those brands listening, because I've been having a lot of conversations with brands that are looking to, or exploring international expansion. So, what could you tell these people listening to these like about let's say, three things to do and probably three things to avoid doing when you go international?
Yeah, I still think that the three things to do is really focus and understand, your profitability in the marketplace. Even in those international markets, tariffs are impacted.
Yeah.
Um, I think that the other thing is to really understand your media channels. There's a lot of different privacy challenges within
Yes.
Europe, for example, which can play impact into the effectiveness of your media dollars. I would say that also, you know, looking at, the demographics and who your customer is in that market and the messaging that's going to resonate with them. I think in international markets, oftentimes the same messaging which works in the US is not going to apply or work in those international markets. So being mindful of that is really important.
Yeah. Going back to the customer profiles, what we value is not what they value, and yeah, it's a different story. So you need to understand the market and the customers.
Yeah.
So, yeah, one more question I have before you go is, we talked so far about many amazing stuff and the evolution of e-commerce, how you approach customer acquisition, retention, what do you see as the evolution of e-commerce in the next few years with everything that's going on? Last year the news was social shopping. Today is, the Shop GPT hype. What are you working on that you can talk about, or what do you see in general that is the future of these next years?
Yeah, I mean, I think LLM is definitely going to be interesting area for brands to play in, and optimization, for LLM. Kind of a lot more consumers are adopting Chat GPT, for example. They just released, I think, a couple of days ago, a new shopping functionality. So there's a lot more there. I think with Perplexity too, you have ads, which they just launched ads earlier this year. Uh, I think that also there's going to be a shift back towards focusing on more of an omnichannel business, and ensuring that you have a presence outside of just the e-commerce space. E-commerce growth itself is more challenging to see. Obviously, COVID, you saw this huge influx, and you saw 89% swings in growth. That's not necessarily true. It'll be more steady and consistent growth, in the future. And so having a focus on omni-channel is really important for brands.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, one is, as the same you're doing, going beyond the storefront is really important for brands, getting out there, going to live events, pop-up stores, whatever that is, interacting with your community, being involved, I think the word is creating an ecosystem. I have seen many, we all seen many companies thrive by creating an ecosystem. Amazon created their own ecosystem, Shopify did the same, and so on. So you can create your own ecosystem through community building, or again, getting involved in your community, truly caring about them, having your own, ambassadors, etc. It's easier for you to thrive rather than, sourcing products and selling them in a store online, right? So I think it's probably the game to play, as you said, is more omni-channel these days. So yeah, everything is changing. And regarding GPT or Shop GPT, as everyone is calling it right now, the other day I read that Visa is enabling AI agents to buy, because up until now you could see, the buy button, but it takes you still to the website. But it's about to change right now, right? So it's gonna be wild, because even the Google Ads performance, it's going down as well, because even if you use Google to search, the AI is results or answer, not even results. The AI answer is the first thing you see, and probably what you want to see right now. So we are shifting away from trying to find links and going towards finding answers. And Google, of course, noticed that they're not dumb, right? And it's what they are showing, meaning that everything that you have done so far to position your brand there is not useless yet, but you're going to see probably fewer clicks, you're going to see fewer conversions. So it's definitely going to change.
Yes, and SEO is changing too, right? Like there's a huge evolution on the SERP on Google, with now Gemini results showing above the fold and being at the top of a page versus your traditional Google ads. So lots of changes happening, but it's exciting for brands, like us who are in that growth stage. I think that there is excitement also for the legacy brands too, right? They have an opportunity to pivot and reestablish themselves across these growth platforms too.
Amazing, great. One final question. I always like asking my guests if they have, and only if they have, a book they like to share with the audience. If it's not a book, or nothing comes to mind. It could be a person, someone you admire, or has helped you in your career. So do you have any, like if it's a book, we put together a list of books every single year, no pressure. If it's a person, we can give them a shout out.
I would say a general theme of books that I read a lot of books on personalization. I think that developing that one-to-one connection with a customer is really important. And especially in this day and age, a customer is expecting a personalized experience, especially in particular with luxury, and in particular within my focus area of business. So I wouldn't, there's a lot of books that I could recommend in that space, but I would say that that's really the area that I personally think is most interesting and valuable.
Yeah, definitely. It's super important these days. So, AJ, it was a pleasure to have you here in the podcast. I learned a lot, and I think we discussed a lot of interesting stuff. So, where can people go to learn more about you and U Beauty?
Yeah, we have a fantastic website. It's www.ubeauty.com. You can learn a ton about the brand through that website. And yeah, if you want to learn or connect with me, you can find me on LinkedIn.
Amazing. So if you're still listening or watching this, first, thank you. And second, unless you are already there, you can go to the DTCinsider.com. Once you find the episode, you will see the show notes, including the LinkedIn handle and the website. AJ, it was a pleasure again. Thank you for being on the podcast.
Thanks so much.
This episode was brought to you by BSR Digital. We help DTC brands grow through paid ads and email marketing campaigns. If you'd like us to help your business grow, head on over to bsrdigital.com and schedule a call with us.